it looks like things are a bit, I mean, I don't know like what to say about this. It's like kind of some kind of calm there, isn't it? It's just like the battlefields are a bit tired. Am I right to say that?
Yeah. So yeah, I think you have made the right observation over the last few weeks, if not even a month now. The active hostilities are not on the ground. It has been halted. And that seems to be the result of exhaustion, mutual exhaustion, because, and of course, as coupled by other factors. So the parties have been fighting for more than a year, and now they have realized that no one is going to be the winner, especially following the pushback. Among the ones that we have discussed in the previous episode. So the TPLF forces were forced to retreat back to their homeland. And since then there are also both the preceding and interfering factors, such as the mediation effort and the shuttle diplomacy, which have been going on over almost for the last six months or so. So yeah, you're right. So the situation on the ground looks like calmer than it used to be. And now there are also some other developments in addition to what we are seeing on the battlegrounds. There are some national, the issue of national dialogue, which is going to happen. Then there is the issue, the ongoing issue of course, the possibility of negotiated settlement has been pressed by the United Nations Secretary General a few days ago. So yeah, that's the situation on the ground, Dr. Abdullah.
Because I saw like so the Prime Minister was traveling to Arab Emirat, and I saw this very very cordial picture, like holding hands and together, then walking. It seems they're like good mates. So that's interesting. So it seems like he was also taking time off from his battlefield expedition, because like last time he was on the battlefield, he was wearing army gear. It looks like he's coming down a bit, but also there's, I think, lots of pressure. Even like Nobel Prize Committee, they also made some kind of statement as well. So this guy, we gave you peace prize, so you cannot do war. So you have to find solutions for the whole situation. And he's one of those leading guy who can do things, isn't he? He has the power. He has the resources. He has the friends. So like, I mean, I think part of me, the way I see like the modern warfare, I mean, you can win war, okay, if you spend this amount of money, if you spend this amount of soldiers. But the problem is, I mean, like, what does it mean at the end? What do you want to achieve? So if you look at the Vietnam War, it's not like America actually lost in the war. I mean, they could have destroyed the whole Vietnam, even whole that part of the land of the world. But I mean, then at the end, it will not be winning. It will be something else. So I think the sooner the people who are involved in the war understand, it's just costly business. It just destroys everyone's life. And at the end, no one is sure, like, I mean, what the end means, I mean, here.
I think that is the pertinent question to ask, Dr. Abdullah, even from the very outset of this conflict, because both parties have been struggling to define what is the purpose of this war, even the exit strategy, let alone defining the ultimate purpose of this war. Even the Prime Minister and his party has been sending a mixed signal and confusions when they are appearing on the national TV, addressing the nation, and of course, even when they communicate to the international community. For one thing, the war is aimless, because most people call it an aimless, wanton destruction of the nation and even the social fabric. So from the very beginning, there was no clear plan, because it was started as a law enforcement. It was a law. That was a narrative at the beginning, and then they suddenly started realizing, no, it was a war and a civil war, and then they even denied it is not a civil war, even though the very definition of a civil war is just a war within a given state between the different parties. So it was actually a full-fledged civil war, which turned out to be even an ethnic war at the end, when they called upon every able-bodied citizen to take arms and save the nation, and whatever that nation would be, because even the insurgent groups are also part of Ethiopia, and which the very difference is a political difference, I would say, bit of ideological difference. So that being said, you just reminded me of what the Prime Minister said on his inaugural speech. On the first day of his inaugural speech, he said exactly the same thing. And I quote that there is no winner in any civil war. He didn't even say in Ethiopian civil war. He said there is any winner, ultimately no winner in any civil war in the human history. And for a stronger reason within the Ethiopian context. That is a direct quotation from the Prime Minister 3 years back while he was addressing the parliament and the nation. And so he was struggling. And as to the power and the resource you were referring to, yeah, he is the most powerful person in Ethiopia, because in institutions, there are no institutional constraints as we see in the liberal democracy somewhere else. He can either make it or break it, because he makes decisions without not properly consulting even his cabinet or even being accountable to the parliament. So he has been on a one-man show, literally. So you were right, because that he has no problem of this encumbrance and roadblocks and institutional constraints and the procedural issues to deal with. So you were right. And so as to the nature of this civil war, which is now has reached a mutually hurting stalemate and making it ripe for peaceful resolution. And the Nobel Peace Committee, they were right in putting some pressure on the Prime Minister, because it has a symbolic value. The fact that he won the Peace Laureate, and at the same time wearing army fatigue and leading the war, is the greatest misnomer of the century, or at least a decade. So they were right. And so there are a host of factors which have somehow contributed towards this stalemate, I would say. But then there is hope for peace to reign in this region of the world, and we will discuss about that maybe when you raise some questions.
Yeah, I mean, like another latest development, it looks like Eritrea is suddenly, getting more interested in Ethiopia's, internal situation, because I mean, I think Eritrea has got long-term, some kind of anger against the group Tigrayan people, isn't it? So they are more or less like arch enemy over the years. So I think the war was between 1998 and 2000. That was brutal war. So that president, more or less, I saw lots of goodwill from him. I mean, that way, I'm just trying to because I'm kind of outsider. So what I'm trying to see here is, because I think the Prime Minister more or less understood that, I mean, this war is, it will not go anywhere. It will just, cycle of violence, and then, it's just continuous process. So I think now he realized that the other option could be contain this group of people. So if he's got the support from Eritrea, so it's kind of some kind of siege there. So you behave. If you behave, then you will get the supplies of food, and we'll give you some stuff, money, whatever you want, but you have to behave, because now we have got gatekeepers around you. Do you think, is it it makes sense, do you think, my observation?
Yeah, that's the reality on the ground, Dr. Abdullah. I mean, it is always good to make the historical analogies with a bit of caution, of course. And what is a common pattern in the Horn of Africa, I hope you might have made a similar observation, and it's that there is a unique pattern, a political pattern or trend in the Horn of Africa, which is that the proxy war usually takes place in the form of interfering in the affairs of the other regime, not the state, but the regime. So one government is interfering in the government as in either hosting or maintaining the stability of the other government in power. That is precisely what has been happening in the Horn of Africa over the last 3 decades, and even more so between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and even the war you was just mentioning, the Ethio-Eritrean War of the 1998-2000 it was a war which has been in the making. It was just stated during the struggle because they used to be somehow friends or allies in bringing down the Derg regime or the military regime during the Cold War, and then the split, the fragmentation, I would say, the fragmentation of insurgent groups is very common in the Horn of Africa, and then they were not sure how to govern Ethiopia, what state they wish to build, a democratic, modern, multinational Ethiopia, and in whose benefit. And that was the divergence between the Eritrean regime, not the Eritrean people and Ethiopian people, but the Eritrean regime and the TPLF. And then the TPLF consolidated its power and it took all the Tigrayan people hostage, in as much as the Eritrean government of Isaias Afwerki took hostage of the Eritrean people, which means the people is equal to the regime, because there is no space for independent voice. So because of that historical hostility between Eritrea and let's call Ethiopia and Eritrea, which is not Eritrea and Ethiopia, actually between the TPLF, the Tigrayan, and the Eritrean regime, they believe that they were defeated. The Eritrean, Isaias Afwerki, was defeated by the TPLF, not by the Ethiopian government. So it has ideological plus ethnic nature. So after the coming into power of the Prime Minister Abiy, he saw, I mean, the Isaias as an opportune moment to take a revenge against the TPLF, because the TPLF were ousted from power, and he found Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to be his friend. And later on, it was found out to be the case that they were planning something. And I'm not questioning about the outbreak of the civil war, who started the war. We have already gone over that discussion. I'm talking about an attempt to internationalize the civil war, simply because the Eritrean engagement has changed the nature of the war itself, and it has huge ramifications for the resolution of the conflict itself. Now, the Eritrea is out of the picture to some extent because the international community has been putting pressures, stronger pressures, and Eritreans' presence in Ethiopia is very limited. And I think that is also one of the reasons which has somehow balanced the armed conflict between the two parties, because Eritrean force, which is a formidable force and giving protection somehow for the Ethiopian government, and then the exhaustion itself and the pressure from the international community, the issue of legitimacy, domestic politics, and plus the struggling economy itself, because economy is almost collapsing because of the war effort. All these factors have somehow affected the course of the conflict. And so, yeah, you're right. There are a host of reasons, but when we talk about the Eritrean issue, it's all about the security of the regime, not security of the state, to put it simply. Yeah.
Just a quick side question, like how long this Eritrean regime has been in power. Should be more than 30 years, looks like.
Since their independence, I would say, the Eritreans knows only one president and one regime. And we are only maybe three years ahead of them, because we have the same regime for the last 27 years, plus 3 years. It's just the reformist government, but it's still the same government. So literally we are the same. For the last 30 years, both Eritrea and the Ethiopian government have the same government, but at least in Ethiopia, we have the different figure or head of state and some form of reformation for good or for bad. So yeah, the Eritrean government has been there since 1991, 92, or even before that. The Eritrean liberation movement was headed by the same people. So you can even extend it to the last for the last 50 years. They know the same personality, which has been in power, either in the form of the leaders of independent movement or in the form of president. So yeah, for the last 5 decades, I would say.
I mean, Africa deserves peace. Africa deserves, lots of good things and goodwill from the world, because Africa is the continent I think suffered the most over the centuries. So I mean, that's why Africa has got more like urgency to deliver. So I mean, lots of things there need to be, the people need to be like, coming forward that, what, I mean, we deserve far better than this. I mean, we talk about, like Congo, like 1960s, Patrice Lumumba and all those great leaders. I mean, we don't see those leaders anymore. So what we are seeing is just, one other thing is like, this like continuous coup as well. So it's like, if you look at even like last couple of days, Burkina Faso, I mean, there is a coup there. I mean, it's like every now and then there is a coup somewhere. And there's another news I found that, I mean, I was listening to a podcast by Amy Goodman, and she was saying that, so this bunch of, the soldiers who actually trained by American forces over the years. So these people who are trained under the same academy, this like what America called peacekeeping force, or like peacekeeping, some kind of peacekeeping. So these people so far in Africa made 9 coups. That's quite an achievement, isn't it? So the peacekeeping is delivering some good stuff there.
So I mean, there is no denying about that, and it seems that there is a coup makers factory somewhere, and the pattern is very pervasive, and it is manifested in different forms. And actually, as you said, even in 2021 alone, like in last year, we have more than 5 or 6 coups, even as close to Sudan, just our neighbor.
Yeah.
Because there was a coup attempt in Sudan, then in generally West Africa, more than 4 coups in the span of less than three months. And the African Union as a body, as an institutional watchdog, has not been doing much in this regard. I mean, the coup has become the modus operandi of a political change, or not even a political change as such, because the political system and the culture is the same and is in a perpetual state. I would rather say some form of disruption of the order. So the disruption has been here and there, and without any fundamental change on the ground, and especially when it comes to the lives and the livelihoods of the people. The same system, same political culture, no democracy, and no peaceful transition, or I could say, or peacemaking process here and there. And the people of Africa deserves a better governance, generally, a democratic governance, and that has been a long overdue. And we saw it with the third wave of democracy, as you know it, something has finally arrived to the African port. And nevertheless, and what we have is a series of coups and coup d'etats and the military regime hijacking of, especially the hijacking of civil disobedience and the so-called social media movement. You know, the Arab Spring has brought the wave of hope and the democratization at least in the North African state, and it was a bit late. I mean, the rain was late because of the wind, and it arrived in Ethiopia around 2017, 2018, as you know, because it is because of the public movement, civic disobedience, that the change has, at least some reform has materialized in Ethiopia. And that was the hope we had. Like, we would have a democratic government which respects the rule of law and human rights. And finally, what we have is a brutal civil war. And what you said is just a symbolic embodiment of a cycle of violence. No change on the ground as such. So yeah, we deserve something better. And I think if I have to quote Mahatma Gandhi, I think he said once, peace is not a path. I mean, peace itself is a path. It is not the road to the path. So we have to change our orientation, our thinking, or our mindset, that peace is the only path, actually.
Yep.
So I think unless and otherwise we inform ourselves that there needs to be a fundamental change by shaking up the ground when necessary, I think there won't be any change in Africa. I mean, of course, this is just a side note.
No, I mean, because I get really, like angry sometimes, when I teach history, the international relations, and this starting point from Europe, this 1870s, the scramble for Africa. The world has got no goodwill for Africa. They destroyed Africa over the years, centuries. I think at one point, the people need to decide that, the resistance is the only option here. So I give this example, like, the people say that, oh, the slavery stopped by America's Civil War, and, this like House of Lords did make some good law, all this bullshit. I mean, slavery stopped because of the resistance from the slave themselves, so the resistance has to come from the people, from the ground. They have to decide what they want, So now what we are saying, it's just like from one party to another party. It's just the same group of people, It's just that doing the biggest loot of that, like centuries. I mean, it's just continuous process. It just the character changes, but the pattern is exactly same, which we saw in 1870s or before that.
I think you're right. I think we need to break with the past. Unless we break with the past and chart a better future, then we will be swimming in the sea of dictatorship, totalitarian government, and of course cycle of coups, and the same cycle. So one thing that I really need to focus is, whenever we talk about the prospect of peace, democratization, and prosperity in Africa, most particularly in Ethiopia, we need a change. Not having a wine in the same old bottle. We need actually to change both the bottle and the wine. They need to be changed. And of course, it has to be a principled change, because not every change is good, as you know. Not every change is for good, but the change has to be principled, it has to be governed, it has to be purposive change, and which has to be well organized. So we have made some resistance, and we are not new for resistance. For example, in Ethiopia, we have that resistance in the 1940s, and the most well-known resistance in the early 1970s, which has brought the empire to its knees, to its brink. And for what? The change was hijacked by a military junta. That was the greatest mistake. And after 40 years, exactly the same thing has repeated itself. And that's why sometimes I believe that history repeats itself, actually, in a similar fashion, especially when it becomes the state identity or the identity of the people. When it becomes a national identity, history really informs the decision-making process. So we we finally said no to the repressive regime since 2014 all the way 2018 for almost 4 years. And what did we have? What we have is having the new personality, not even new personalities, just change of personalities and a bit of reshuffling, and with the same old bottle. And even the wine itself is not that different. The taste is the same. It has the same shape and the size. So there needs to be a fundamental change, and that change has to be carefully crafted. That's what I'm saying. Because you can have a change, but the change may not be a change at all, or it may lead into some forms of total disruption and destruction. So that's the remark I would like to say.
Because what it does, like, when you have got this system collapse, we see like lots of bad stuff on the ground. Like, what first thing it brings is all those warlords on the ground. So these warlords, these are the businessmen. They've got no interest in, peace or anything, civil rights or human rights. They just want to make money. They want to, bring more arms. And the external bodies are quite happy to supply all those arms. It's a pretty good business model. And then when you've got so many warlords on the ground, that it becomes really difficult to stop this business model. Disrupt this supply line.
Or even the question would be whose peace? That is the most important question to ask. And whose peace, and at whose expense, and how to achieve that? Because one of the things that I didn't mention actually in my previous discussion was the proliferation of small arms and light weapons in the Horn of Africa. That is a very, very disturbing trend, which has been observed by so many different scientists, scholars, and even well documented. So the proliferation of light weapons or weapons generally is somehow directly related to this war-making machine or business model. So that business, as long as the business model is there, and those with strong interest in the continuation of the status quo, actually, the status quo is a continuous civil war and a disruption and a destabilization of the region. And the Horn of Africa has actually become the hotbed for a proxy war in a different name and different forms. That has become a very common trend, and definitely the proliferation of arms has contributed to the ongoing conflict, because if you do not have a monopoly over violence, because that is what defines any effective state, right? Effective government. Do the Ethiopian government has effective control over its own territory and sovereignty and the people? That is a question we need to ask. And I would say no. Still, the government has no effective control over the sizable portion of the country. Like on the southwest, it is out of the control of the government, even within the central part. Then there are some informal groups, rebel groups in the northern part. Even in the not only in the Tigray region, which is a semi-autonomous, de facto autonomous state now, to use a proper terminology. The Amara region, which has been fighting alongside the government, seem to have is organizing itself based on some informal armed groups or insurgent groups. So this makes central government with having a weak control over the country and the states and the affairs of the people. And the stability or even the instability is being affected and driven by so many different factors, one of which is the arms control, and the other one is the inability of the federal government, not unwillingness, but the inability of the central government to establish effective control. And it directly fits into the prospect of peace, which we are discussing now.
Because I kind of mentioned about that like, your prime minister went to Arab Emirat. This is not a good sign, because we know like what Arab Emirat has been doing in this civil war. So if you have got goodwill, you will not go to those countries who were actually involved in the war. Rather, people would love to see him, going to like UN headquarters, asking UN, can you help on this? It seems like he's going to those people who has been involved in serious war crimes, not only in like Ethiopia or other countries as well. So that's like that shows, like, I mean, what you really want. You see, so I mean, you were saying that, I really want to like make peace, and live in stability and all those things. But what you are doing?
Peace is actually a continuous. It is a project which requires a continuous effort, a concerted and a continuous effort. It is not like you like to make peace overnight and say that now let's make peace and tomorrow make war. It is not. It doesn't work like that. So it has to be sustainable. It should be sustained. And the peace process, I would say, which was started with the rapprochement between Ethiopia and Eritrea back in 2018, was actually sponsored not by the African Union or even by the UN as such, but it was by the same states and the same people. The prime minister is asking for help. 3 years ago, the Arab nations and the states were sponsoring the peace process between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which has never been made public and has never been comprehensive. It has never put the people at the center, because any lasting peace, in the modern understanding of peace, should be from the human security perspective. You have to give priority for human security. And we don't know much about what has happened, what really happened between Ethiopia and Eritrea, apart from some media headlines. And it was at a personal level between the two leaders, without involving even the parliament, like the parliament. Or some foreign, for example, foreign ministry was not part of it. The parliament was not part of it. And then the public is not aware of the details of what the peace treaty itself. And not even the peace treaty, because the peace treaty, legally speaking, is just a normative framework. What is more important is a political commitment. And like translating what is there, the agreement, into practice. And which is not a one-off project. It is a project, as I said. So yes, those people and the leaders has an interest in the Horn of Africa and in the Ethiopian affairs. That is why they have been pumping a lot of dollars, billions of dollars. That's what they did. And I hope they continue to do that. But the issue is whose peace and how to make peace, and will it be sustainable? And what is going to be, what is going to be the role of the Arab nations and those specific states in resolving the ongoing conflict in Ethiopia and bring about peace or lasting peace in Ethiopia? I'm not so optimistic when it comes to this kind of piecemeal approach, which is not institutionalized at all. So it is the same thing, and we don't really know what is happening. I know that there is some form of shuttle diplomacy which is going on. There is a possibility of a negotiated settlement, not necessarily because the Ethiopian government needs peace or war, but it is because it is imposed upon the government and the state itself. It is imposed because there was exhaustion, as I said. So it is right from that perspective. There are pressures, various pressures from the international community, which is a good thing. And the most important thing, which we should not forget, is the humanitarian aspect, as you said. The humanitarian catastrophe is the thing, like it is a glaring fact, and you cannot shy away from it. There is no hiding corner. To be honest, there is no hiding corner. You cannot just brush it off, and you don't say that there is no humanitarian catastrophe. And when you try to fix one, and then there is another hole, and then there is famine, and then there are other systemic human rights violations that we have discussed in our first episode or discussion. But for now, even that has not been properly resolved and there is no accountability. I think what they are trying to do is to avoid any form of accountability, I mean, legal accountability, in the name of peacemaking. So they're saying, okay, let's forgive and forget and move on at the expense of the people who have suffered, at the expense of victims, or even at the expense of the nation, I mean, the state itself. So that is what is really happening there. But why are we now suddenly, for some people, it looks like as if the bomb is dropped out from the sky, but this process has been there in the back door, like behind the scene. I would say we are trying to make peace, or at least sitting on a negotiation table or discussion table, because the very future of the state hangs in balance. That is what I would like to make. That's the most important point. The very future of Ethiopia, the Ethiopian state is precarious, and it hangs in balance, so that if you want to save the nation, if you want to save of the state, the stability and integrity of the state, the only way is to stop fighting and try to talk and maybe chart a better future through some form of diplomacy and skillful peacemaking and conflict resolution. Yeah.
I came from a kind of ideological background of like anti-war like position, because in my lifetime I saw war. I saw like even my country got independence, and then I saw like Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, and then we saw like Iran-Iraq war, and then it's just continuous cycle of violence, just like it did not do any good to anyone. It's just carnage on the ground by just like group of people, like 10 people or like 50 people. They try to solve their problems, and then like inside this kind of huge monstrous war, like half of the world. So I mean, people like me, we always say that war is dangerous thing, dangerous enterprise. It will destroy things. It hold the progress of our things we actually care about for years. Even like Ethiopia's war and everything sorted out by next month, it will take years to like Ethiopia to come back and then bounce back and then restart their normalcy. One thing I really want to mention that so this the way these like leaders are behaving. I mean, you can see like during the like Vietnam War, I think America's like State Department was run by Robert McNamara. So he was an economist. Okay, so he has got certain idea about war from like business point of view. His idea is if you spend this amount of money, that can produce this kind of outcome. So if you have got this kind of money, you can still win war. So if you invest this kind of money, then no. So I think that pattern is still there. So like, your prime minister or someone else, they're thinking that, yeah, if you have got this amount of money, then I can still win this war.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, Abdullah. But in the Ethiopian context, there is one additional dimension to it. Yes, in any war, I would say, I mean, ultimately, in a civil war, there is no winner, as we said, at least from the state perspective or from the people-oriented approach. But for the politicians, and even in any war, there are profiteers. We should never forget that there are profiteers, and the profiteers are there, and they are elites, and the elites always make war. And the cycle of war, I mean, more than I do. The cycle of war, if we have to do it in a very simple model, the elites construct and make narratives of war, and then the soldiers fight, and the people suffer, both humanitarianly and in terms of course, sacrificing their life. And then there comes a time when there are exhaustion in war, and finally, the same elites will be meeting in a five-star hotel somewhere in London or New York, and start negotiating and bringing war to an end. This is what I call the cycle of war. Any war, especially civil war, especially interstate war is a bit different, but in any civil war, this is a pattern or the cycle. So if we apply the same cycle of war, and exactly or precisely that's what's happening in Ethiopia, and the profiteers and those people who are profiting from this ongoing war are the elites. And of course, the proceeds from this war are short-lived. That's why we have to know, like the short term, in terms of short-term planning, politicians always want to profit out of a war, and they go to war whenever it is necessary. It is necessary only for them, not for the people, not for the country. So yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. So, and then when it comes to Ethiopia, apart from the business and the political profits, which might accrue from the outcome of the war or in the course of the war even, but then the people are suffering. The people suffers everywhere, but not only soldiers. In Ethiopia, it's not soldiers, but like ordinary people, millions, not hundreds, not thousands. It's like millions of people are suffering from the war or from the impacts of war, both directly and indirectly. Even in the aftermath of war, there are millions of people who needs to be taken care of, who has to be reestablished, and whose lives and livelihoods has been lost and displaced. So those people in millions have nobody who are attending to their cause. They are just suffering, and their misery is being exacerbated from day to day, and the situation is deteriorating by the day, especially the security situation. So that's why I'm saying that the business model is there, but there is this additional aspect to the Ethiopian civil war, where the elites, in addition to what we have discussed when it comes to the relation between the Eritrean regime and the Ethiopian regime, because in Africa and most particularly in the Horn of Africa, they are interested in regime change, not. There has never been animosity between two independent states as such in the Horn of Africa. The animosity has been between specific ethnic group, but more generally between regimes, different regimes. So these are the two dynamics we need to take into consideration, not to be misled by the Western orientation of seeing the world from a particular lens or from the liberal view, because there are some particularities when it comes to Africa and of course in Ethiopia as well. Yeah.
I mean, especially when you talk about this business model, so even if you look at the parallel example like Ukraine, Russia, what's happening right now, I mean, if you look at the structure of these two countries, it's not only the leadership is there, they are like saying lots of things, but the problem is on the ground. If you look at Ukraine's GDP, like 80% GDP actually owned by the 50 oligarchs in Ukraine, and in Russia, just 120 oligarchs control 45% of the GDP. So I mean, so whose country is this? No. So I mean, war is I think war is very good in a quick time. You can make so much money, so much money, because I mean on the ground, all these warlords, they don't give it. I want to swear even. They don't give a shit about about people's lives, their well-being or education. Nothing to do with that, And there's a good example in the Bosnian War. So Bosnia was fighting against these Serbians. So what civil war does, at one point there was a arms embargo on all the parties. So the Bosnia was under siege, and they ran out of all those arms and ammunitions. So then how did they survive? One of their main suppliers of arms is actually Serbia themselves. So there is a business model created on the ground, because it's money on the table. So they are buying the arms from the enemy and then to fight against them.
That's a bit strange, so to say. It's a bit strange. You cannot be an enemy and at the same time friends. I mean, at the same time, which is very strange. But enemy for whom? That's the question, as you said.
Yeah,
So enemy.
I'm pretty sure on the ground in Ethiopia, these warlords are, like supplying arms.
Maybe to both sides. Yeah, maybe to both sides.
Or
transnationally, because that is how the international criminal syndicates work. Like organized, transnational organized crimes are always, and the criminal networks are always organized in that way. But in Ethiopia, the disturbing effect, the most disturbing aspect of the matter is we don't even know the suppliers. Who are the suppliers? That's a question. I think that was a question actually.
I think you don't need to know the suppliers. No, if there is war, you know that there will be suppliers.
Exactly. Of course. Yeah. I mean, war. It might be tempting to say that war is business and the business is war. Like war means business, business means war. It is very tempting, but then in the Ethiopian context, then there are some recent developments, if we may jump on that. So when we, imagine or think of the prospect of peace in Ethiopia and beyond, even in the Horn of Africa, I could just raise three most important developments or factors, because always, like a scholar, there are so many different factors and variables, but for now, the three most important developments over the recent weeks in regard to the ongoing conflict, civil war, and the prospect of peace they hinge upon the following factors for me. First, the government decided to embark upon a national dialogue, which has been a long overdue, and different parties, including the TPLF, and others which are fighting the government, and those in prison have been continuously and persistently asking for a inclusive national dialogue. So the Ethiopian Parliament has passed a bill a couple of weeks ago, and now the commissioners for the National Dialogue Commission have been recruited, and in the process of being recruited, so they are trying to make at least set the process of national dialogue in motion. So it is very important. It is very important, not necessarily in relation to the ongoing conflict, but indirectly, because if we resolve the underlying issues, okay, even the cause of the war itself, just think for a moment that if we have had a genuine national dialogue a year ago, a couple of years ago, and if it was part of the reform package, then we have never seen anything like this. So it is, for me, putting the cart before the horse. The transition was mismanaged. It was perfectly mismanaged, so much so that what is trying to be used as a mechanism to contain or even to end the conflict would have been what would have avoided the conflict from the very beginning. So this national dialogue, if it is genuine, inclusive, as the name indicates, and the procedure is transparent enough, and all parties, including those warring parties, are partake in the negotiation and in the discussion, if every agenda are put on the table without any discrimination and any preconditions, that would set at least the stage for the next step of discussion between elites, including a negotiated settlement for the ongoing civil war. The war in the northern part of Ethiopia. So I think that is one important development, recent development, since we have discussed our last episode. Then the other one is there is no ongoing hostility, active hostilities, as you have already rightly pointed out. And that shows that there are an exhaustion from both sides. And it's not only exhaustion, but that has been seen in the press releases of both parties. For the federal government is showing some kind of rapprochement, and then the other party is also showing some form of somehow toning down their narratives, that dangerous narrative and rhetorics, and saying we are ready to make peace. And the BBC reported that both the federal government and the TPLF has indicated their intention, at least, to negotiate. So that intention, I would hope, will be translated into actual formal negotiation. So that is another development, which is that halting of, at least temporary, I would say de facto, not de jure, de facto ceasefire. Okay, you know that the de jure is yet to come into fruition, but there is a de facto mutual understanding, like mutual understanding of a ceasefire. So we already have a ceasefire, or at least some kind of moratorium. I think that's the term. Some kind of moratorium, implicit moratorium on the hostility. So that is a second development. But then the third aspect of it is the involvement of international community. The international communities somehow have involved both directly and indirectly, and the United States has been consistently pushing both parties to the negotiation table, and all other parties, including the Arab nations. And the role of the Arab nations or states are indirect, and it is somehow dubious, and it is informed by some form of business and whatever. And I don't think they are governed by any normative considerations. I am sure about that. They are not concerned about any normative issues, but then there is some business model, and there is issue of regime security and whatever, issue of refugees, and issue of the relationship even within the Horn of Africa, and most importantly, of course, the geopolitical and geostrategic consideration for the Arab nations, especially Saudi Arabia and even Turkey. So the concerted effort from the international community, as coupled with the other two factors that I have mentioned, may see to it that we are going to witness some form of peace process. So there is some prospect as compared to our previous discussions, which has been like, because if you remember in our second episode, the prime minister was on the wall wearing the fatigue, and now we are seeing quite the opposite. Of course, for the strange, I mean, for some observers, neutral observers, it seems that it is quite a reversal, but it is not a reversal. It is just because the government has not been transparent to the people, and all those strategies has been utilized in a way that benefits the government politically, not even the country or the state or even the people. So in any case, these are the three main developments, and based on these developments, we may discuss some issues if you have some questions, Dr. Abdullah.
I mean, my worry is like, I mean, historically, in a civil war, this kind of ceasefire or this kind of lull in the war is always tricky, because we talked about this like exhaustion, the tired soldiers are tired on the ground. So what they do during the civil war, this kind of lull or this kind of some kind of time out, they tend to be used for reorganize, recharge, refresh their capabilities, and then they will come back in the battleground again. So if the all those initiative and everything is just like rhetoric, so I think there has to be some kind of pressure from the people, because last thing we will do is like rely on these regimes who wear like Armani suit, Ray-Ban sunglasses, and then go to all those places. That's a bad sign. That's a bad sign when millions of people's lives are at stake. So I think populace, the mass, have to be careful, have to have leverage on these people's lives. Otherwise, the peace will become in their terms, not like people's terms. Regimes will always bypass people's interest or anything. It's their interest, their good food, their good wine, their travel, their holidays, look at them, what they wear. This is a good benchmark to decide, like, is he a good leader? When he wears Armani suit, that means you have to be very careful with this guy.
I think that's the most important aspect to see. So that's very. I mean, you flagged a very important issue here. So I see two important factors to be considered here when we talk about the leverage of the people. I mean, the power of the people, simply. Unfortunately, the people are powerless in Ethiopia, like anywhere in Africa or even in the other parts of the world, because they have no power, and they are suffering from humanitarian crisis already, like layers of issues and problems, and the poverty is already there, and there is no democratic system, there is no transparency, as I said, there is no accountability. So in the absence of these channels, or even the media, which is totally controlled by a specific group and by the government, the narratives, all narratives are controlled and framed and controlled by the government. And so the politics is dominated by either one party or the other. And so if media is not for the government, and if poverty is bedeviling, and if humanitarian crisis is a most important issue for the people, and if there is no participatory and participatory system, right, decision-making process, the participatory decision-making process is alien for the Ethiopian people or Ethiopian politics as much as it is in Africa. So without participatory democracy, or even in its absence, at least as a very bare minimum, without some form of accountability, then we can't talk about the power of the people, unfortunately. So the power of the people at the grassroots level is saying no and feeling the war fatigue. If they feel the war fatigue, that is a power itself. I mean, there should be a high time for the people to say, enough is enough. We are tired of your war and your business, as you said, and you can't make business out of our life and livelihoods and our security. So I think that could be a movement at a grassroots level. But other than that, as I said, there are no structures and mechanisms or even systems in place which empowers the people. And that is a very the most demanding task to do. But then the other issue, which I wanted to flag out to you, is the issue of credible commitment. Is there a credible commitment? Because you mentioned, like, they use this momentum, this timeout to recharge themselves, to reorganize, like retreating and reorganizing and then relaunching their attack in a different way, or maybe changing strategy or the war strategy. That could be the case, which has happened actually even in the course of this war last year. But now the only way to put a check on both parties or even all warring parties is through pressure from the international community. Because how could you enforce credible commitment? Because you don't know credible commitment without having some form of deterrence in international relations, I mean, in interstate relationship. But within the state, the international community must put pressure, I mean, credible, meaningful pressure, so that the government would feel, not the people, the government would feel the pain. And one of which is, as we discussed, is a diplomatic pressure and a targeted smart sanction. So I think that's very, very important. And otherwise, there is no credible commitment from both parties other than something which is internal. So the internal aspect is being exhausted, being short of arms supply, being short of soldiers, or maybe just their own assessment of the future of their own interest in the state, because they know now, for sure and for fact, that no one is going to be a winner. I think that is actually the most credible commitment we can see than the international pressure or the power of the people. There is exhaustion, and I think the parties have come to realize that nobody is going to decisively win this civil war, and I think that's a good news. It's a good news that they felt the pain now, of course, at the expense of the people, which we have discussed, but at least finally they came to realize that it is very painful and that nobody is going to get away with it, or at least it is not in anyone's best interest if seen from the long-term perspective. Yeah, this is the two issues I just wanted to add.
I mean, just like one last point, because I'm running out of time. One really important point, because I mean, I was doing my PhD thesis on a particular place called East Timor during the early 2000s, when East Timor has got a situation where it was ruled by Indonesia for 25 years during the Cold War. Just total aggression. It's a crime against humanity. It's a war crime, all kind of things they did. But I mean, again, there's a large number of diaspora population from East Timor. What they did, they created some kind of international network with those diaspora people. So they created this collective thing, no party, no, things like that. Because I'm quite optimistic about people's power, so that it looks like the people on the ground are just tired, and then, all kind of things, they're not thinking properly. But there is a large diaspora population who are from different ethnic group, different part of Ethiopia. Whether there is any kind of international, some kind of coalition from all those groups, and then, bring some more sanity. It looks like on the ground, just madness either by the warlords or, so-called dictators or so-called, political party leaders. I mean, so there is a model there. Can you give us some insight about that? Any international, some kind of network there where, all the parties, whoever they are, what part of Ethiopia, doesn't matter, they actually care about Ethiopia as a country, as a nation.
I think that you just pointed to the heart of the problem, especially when you talk about the unity. So that's the most important word for me. The problem with the diaspora network or transnational diaspora network or expatriates or the Ethiopian diaspora is the house is divided. That's the problem. So the house is divided in a different way because of many reasons. One, because of political affiliation, and because of identity politics. So whenever you try to organize or mobilize, and everybody is trying to mobilize around a specific issue, not putting Ethiopia at the center of the struggle, or maybe trying to sideline some political views, ethnic and religious differences or ideological battles, and trying to save the country, putting the people in front of everything. That is what is lacking. So the house is divided because of those reasons I've mentioned. And the government has been continuously investing, not in the country, but in dividing even the diaspora. So the diaspora, they are speaking not to each other, but across each other. And some of them support the government. Some of them even support the commission of widespread human rights violation, because this is the lowest you can go, or even supporting genocide, or even the rhetoric saying eliminate this group and that group. So how could you be able to to talk, even saying someone like me who is centrist, who is trying to bring people together, let's say. So everyone is suspicious, distrustful of the other person, even when you come up with the most ideal plan to unite people and form some kind of coalition or united front. So the division within the diaspora has paved the way and created a conducive environment for the warring parties and the government to continue their business of creating war and continuing the war. So I think one way of overcoming the problem, as we said, is a people-oriented approach where, irrespective of our difference, whatever difference that might be, is trying to unite, around one specific issue, maybe citizenship or the very future of Ethiopia, and saving the country and the people from further suffering and pain. So that would be the most organizing principle, the main organizing principle, political principle. But we are far from it. But the only way out is if we are about to bring about or harness the power of the people, the natural power of the people, it is to appeal to the people. And when we say the people, is the elites, political elites, and the diaspora. And the first starting point is, of course, to bring some form of unifying idea. The ideas are very rare. Those unifying ideas are very rare because it is a deeply divided society. And the diasporas are actually more divided than the society, and they are the one who are dividing the society. How could someone who is causing the problem can solve the problem at the same time? That is a paradox. Like, the diasporas are supposed to save the people, but they are the one who are creating actually the problem. So I think there should be some forms of stock taking, which is very necessary, and trying to come up with some ideas which unite the people and saving the country, and somehow at least alleviate the pain and suffering which the people are going through. I think that is the only way out in terms of the power of the people and diaspora and the network, transnational network. But to do so, the international community still needs to play a crucial role, which they have been playing, and they have to seize this momentum. They have to keep up the momentum and see to it that there should be a peaceful and a prosperous Ethiopia, which can be good for the people and which is also good for the Horn of Africa. That is my final remark.
Thank you, Moges. I mean, it's like so frustrating, you know, like every time I talk about this, I mean, it's just the same trauma, tragedy, you know, goes on and on and on. I mean, people will, at the end, you know, they will come down, you know, but that can be too late at the cost of, you know, too many lives, too many destruction, especially the diaspora people. If they just like unite just one point that, you know what, just stop the violence, just stop it, just stop this violence, okay? And then see like, or whatever, just stop this violence, just like one thing. No war on the ground, no battlefield, no arms on the ground. Let's see like what we can achieve. No,
I think that could be a magic wand, like a magic wand. Let's stop what we are doing, like violence, and we'll talk about other issues later. That would be, I think, that was the most powerful way of ending the discussion.
Yeah, we don't want anything, you know, just stop the war, nothing else, man. Just stop, and then, you know, and then think, you know, just take some time off, you know, go for fishing, you know, go for holiday, you know, and come back, you know, and then think about it. Just stop it, stop this violence.
I think those people are not the kind of people who enjoy holidays or vacations. They are actually enjoying war as a holiday.
So war is a holiday.
I think so. Yeah. What is a holiday for them?
But I think, no, what we are doing here, you know, these are historical documents, what we're doing here, you know. So we are commenting, we are trying to, you know, try to make sense of what's going on the ground. And, you know, even like, you know, 200 people watches it, you know, if they think that, oh, that makes sense, you know, so because like one thing we did not do throughout our conversation, incite any kind of hatred or incite any kind of violence or incite any kind of, you know, we just like, we really care about humanity, that everyone, this is a gift, you know, being a human being. And then, you know, this destruction, it just insane. It's just wrong. It's, I mean, immoral if you believe in God or anything, you know.
It is inexplicable, you know, you can't really explain it, but it is what it is. It is a tragedy.
Yeah. So my plan is like, I think because you were ill a bit in the meantime, and then we started teaching. It's quite, you know, busy time. I think I really wanted to, you know, carry on like at least once a month, so that just like update what's happening, you know, some like, you know,
yeah, why not? That's a good idea. Because
I think we got lots of things because we are seeing it from like vantage point, like what's happening. We can see like who is going where and how this.
We can also extend to the Horn of Africa for the future, which makes sense. And even the MENA region as well. So that we will have a lot of issues to discuss. I'm happy to do that.
It's totally like neutral, humane way to see it. And I think hope it makes some sense on the ground.
Yeah, it is. It makes some difference because there's so small gestures and initiatives that makes huge difference in history actually. Yeah, that being said, I don't want to arrest you here. You only have quite a few minutes. I love Dundee. Just imagine it has been 4 years and I still have this Dundee on my shirt. Would you imagine? 4 years. So like my heart is still in Dundee, to be honest. So
very good. Okay, good man. You take care.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.